written records of execution orders authorized and signed personally by the so-called commander-in-chief of the illegal Donetsk People's Republic, Igor Girkin, aka Strelkov, and also of hearings of self-proclaimed military tribunals convicting people to death have been found in Slovyansk. An illegal militant group representing no one but themselves and headed by foreign passport holders whose sole authority on the ground stems from the guns they carry, grants itself the authority to assign and execute extrajudiciary death sentences on an illegally occupied territory. The mass graves discovered recently in areas liberated by the Ukrainian forces are a tragic testimony to the degree of lawlessness that marks the insurgent actions. Armed separatists are increasingly better armed, as the ASG just testified, using heavy weaponry, including mortars, anti-aircraft guns, tanks, and armored vehicles. They continue to shoot down helicopters and planes, including at high altitudes, including the downing this week of a Ukrainian military plane and transport helicopter. Sources on the ground indicate the tendency of the last days that whenever Ukrainian troops deploy sufficient power to pose a threat to militants and are in a position to launch strikes against their positions, the illegal armed groups redeploy to a nearby town, exposing civilian populations to combat risk and forcing them to flee as they install their armed vehicles, artillery and Grad rocket launchers in residential areas. Government's efforts to establish ceasefire or humanitarian corridors have been repeatedly violated by the insurgents. While Russia is quick to blame the Ukrainian authorities, we're yet to hear a single condemnation by Russia of the reckless acts by the insurgents, including around the crash site of the Malaysian civilian airliner. We fully agree with the SG on the importance of a thorough and independent investigation into the crash and the need to bring those responsible to account. The OSCE monitoring mission reports have confirmed facts of movement of armed individuals across the Russian border into Ukraine and back. Instead of closing its borders to such illegal movements or mercenaries and weapons, Russia continues to play war games at Ukraine's eastern border. Once again, alarmingly large numbers of combat-ready troops and armaments are amassed on Ukraine's borders. Defense Minister Shoigu's latest statements on the combat readiness of Russian so-called peacekeepers are also highly alarming and once again raise serious questions about Russia's true intentions in the region. No less troubling is Russia's ongoing escalation of Cold War rhetoric against Europe and the West, now extended into sanctioning food imports, which will undoubtedly affect the Russian population itself. All these actions are the exact opposite to confidence building and de-escalation that is so badly needed and for which the international community has called repeatedly. While we are seriously concerned about the deteriorating humanitarian situation in east of Ukraine and the civilian suffering, and the ASG again has spoken extensively about this, we have to be very clear. The key to ending this suffering is in the hands of Russia, and it hinges on its continued support to illegal armed separatist groups. I thank you, Mr. President.